Good evening, everyone, and welcome back. Well, it's been a while. 3 months, and here we are. We're basically 1 week away from kickoff, and it's good to see you all again. I am Gary Redmond at your service. Welcome to episode 96 of New York Red Bulls Discussion Group, the podcast, and Carlos Cano and, of course, Miguel Nunez will be with me very shortly. We have a terrific show for you guys this week. To start things off, we have Steve Cangialosi, Anthony Merced stopping by to talk all about the New York Red Bulls for the season 2024, which gets underway on Sunday versus Nashville. Of course, after the break, we're going to talk about our new segment, which is standings, schedules, and predictions, and when you guys can actually play along. And, hey, you can have lunch on us if you guys happen to beat all of us, if you happen to win all the points. Now, of course, naturally, if you missed the live show, which is happening right now, don't worry about it. As always, the recording will be available on our YouTube channel, which is going on right now, Goals TV, which will be uploaded, and Spotify the very next day. So you can get your fix, of course, on the New York Red Bull podcast. And, of course, as always, we talk about this all the time. No more, no less than anything else. We strive to make the podcast better on every episode. Every episode. After all, it is your show. So if you have any questions, comments, suggestions, do please send them to our email address at rbdgthepodcast@gmail.com. Again, that's rbdgthepodcast@gmail.com. And before we even get underway, one of our wonderful members of the discussion group is having a birthday today. That's right. Karen Edge, if you're out there, we hope that you're celebrating and bringing that flag up and fly high if you're celebrating with your friends and family. Happy birthday to you. And of course, let's get underway by bringing two of my wonderful co-hosts, the one and only Carlos Cano and Miguel Angel Nunez. Gentlemen, good to be back. Good to see you guys. How you been doing? How's the fam and everybody else?
Good to be back, you guys. Good to be back. Time to talk Red Bull soccer. Let's go.
All right.
Yeah. I'm so happy to be back to rain on everybody's parade again. Okay, let's go.
Yeah. Of course. If you're wondering what happened to Lonray Badmus and of course Mark Coates, they'll be with me next week as we do all time. As we do every time we do a rotation. So they'll be back with us next week. But let's talk about the one thing that has lit up the discussion group, and it's been on fire since day one. We talked about how the team made this announcement, right? How they were going to bring in, what's the word? What was the two words we keep hearing? The established signings and something. There was going to be a significant upgrade to the roster, and it's been underwhelming at best. I mean, I want to give this team, I want to give this team a little bit of an out, Miguel, but I can't, based on what I've seen and talked about thus far. And Miguel, you go first. Have the Red Bulls done okay, not done enough, or they still have a long way to go?
Listen, Gary, we signed an actual player of note, Forsberg, okay? And besides that, who have we signed? We signed a 19-year-old winger, right? I think he's Norwegian. And then we signed a Swedish
Genjar.
21. That guy, yeah. Genjar. Jengar, okay. And then we signed a 21-year-old Swedish center back, or he can play left or right back. Noah Ellie, okay. So those are our big international signings, only one of which I deem an actual game-changing signing, okay. But what we have to take into account is that Dante Van Zier and Lewis Morgan are going to be like brand new signings this year.
Which is kind of ironic.
Yeah, I mean, But
not going to cost the club a thing, right? And not going to cost the club a thing. But should they stay healthy, they were basically the two missing pieces, right, Carlos? I mean, every time when we saw an offensive threat, whenever the time they moved the ball offensively, we kept seeing those dotted outline players that the ball should have went to, and they're not there. So with them both being on the field, they stay healthy. I mean, we know that Lewis Morgan is not even 100% fit yet. They're moving him along and really taking their time to, get him all set up. But if these two guys are on the pitch at the same time, along with Forsberg, and all three are switched on, do you see a significant difference offensively?
Well, that's the biggest thing, right? So if anyone's been reading up, so MLS has, of course, their season preview for all of the squads, and to me that was the probably the biggest thing that I agreed with, right? Is that right now we don't know that this team has a proven goal scorer, right? And so to Miguel's point, Lewis Morgan, Van Zier, they're essentially like new signings, right? Because I mean, Lewis Morgan didn't play last season. Van Zier had, I don't know, a third of a season, if you will,
Gary,
that happened.
Carlos, let me correct you. Lewis Morgan came on for a penalty kick that he missed. Okay,
well,
so there you go. Yeah.
So we have that, right? And so that's the thing. And that's so when I take a look at the off season, right, and try to assess, evaluate what they did or didn't do, the biggest thing for me is that they haven't really addressed what the biggest issue was last season, which was the goal scoring. Where are the goals coming from? Now, you take with a grain of salt what players do in the preseason because it's the preseason, right? But it seems like Elias has been lighting it up. Elias Manuel, he's been scoring some goals in preseason. Again, what does that mean? We're not really going to know until we hit the ground running this season. So that to me is going to be the biggest question mark, right? And the reality is that if this team somehow does manage to score goals and that they do it consistently, then you know what? The season may not be as bad as we think. But if we're back to if we're going to have a repeat of last season where we don't know where goals are going to come from, then it's going to look to be a long season indeed.
Not to mention it's going to be ugly coming from the fan base. I mean, when my assessment on the team, looking at it on paper, okay, it doesn't pass anything. Okay, it doesn't make the fan base get excited for the upcoming season, and that's a problem. It's almost like it was an entire letdown. Now, the front office may not look at it in that retrospect, but when you ask everyone around the fan base, around the group, and everything else, they're underwhelmed. They were expecting something seismic, and all they got was basically a little tremor, nothing else. There's one person, of course, who was at Coachella, and he was able to see with his own eyes about the state of the team and everyone else, and everything else. And he's been reporting that. And of course, we're talking about the one and only Anthony Merced. And I'll just bring the question right to you, sir. Okay. We talked about this. Okay. Is this team, do you feel that the changes that were made, okay, with the Red Bulls, did they check all the boxes? Did they hit all the marks? Or based on what you're seeing, so far, it's almost like, okay, it's a reboot, except for players that are returning from injury. Your thoughts, sir?
Yeah. So first off, I think we need to not take the results very seriously, because what I saw, being the only Red Bull journalist there for those games, was
he was the only Red Bull journalist there. There was nobody
else.
I was the only one there.
I was the only one. It was me and everyone covering the LA Galaxy. It was literally a tale of two halves, right? Like, think of it like baseball preseason. your starters play, or NFL preseason, your starters play a certain amount of time, and then they don't. And depending on the team they were playing, sometimes they were playing against the C team of the opposition, and then when their A guys came off, the A guys of the other team came on, right? So really what we're trying to analyze here is when the A guys were on the pitch, what did they look like? And I'm going to put the Galaxy game off to the side for a second because that was interesting. We'll talk about that in a moment. But the game against Austin, which was closer to what that starting 11 is going to be like, was incredibly interesting. We saw 3 in the back. We saw Reyes. We saw Nealis. We saw, is it Eli? Ellie? I still don't know how to pronounce his name yet. I'll find out tomorrow at the media day. So 3 in the back. We saw 4 in the middle, 4 to 5 in the middle, and then 2 up top. Forsberg is anywhere between the left wing, floating into the middle as a playmaker. He looked fantastic. He looked like he was not. He looked, there was no exhaustion. He did not look like a guy that's been playing full minutes since August of last year. He looked like he was totally ready to go. And he has a way to play.
I mean, he was really in mid-season form when he left Leipzig. So it's not like he's not been playing for a while. I mean, he's been his last game. He played 5-10 games before he came here. So he, unlike Van Zier, should be fitter than anybody. I mean, and that's when we talked about Van Zier, Carlos coming to the club. What did he say? I'm going to score. Give me some 10 goals a game. And then he had the debut from hell.
But again, the big difference is he may look midseason now. The question is obviously what's he going to look like in August when he's supposed to have an off season that doesn't have one. The good thing about Forsberg is Sweden is not in the Euros, so he will not be going away with the club at that time. He may be called up for international friendlies, but he won't be away from the team in those significant games, whether it's a Leagues Cup or those July and August MLS games. But I really have to put forward, it was fantastic seeing what he put in front of the strikers. At no point did I see in either of the games him and Van Zier on the field for any significant amount of time. I know they had other preseason games. The first one, it was him, Manuel, and Burke. And the second one, it was Mitchell, Manuel, and Forsberg on the field. Dante and Forsberg did play a little bit in that Galaxy game, but not for any significant amount of minutes. But he is able to put the ball in places where now we will know for absolute sure whether these strikers are good enough to play. Because, man, Manuel missed a header in that Galaxy game that was on a plate. And if he didn't think he could get it, he could have laid off of it, and the guy behind him could have put it away. That's the kind of play he is going to bring to this team this year.
Okay, so
Anthony, I got to ask you. It was reported that Lewis Morgan played 10 minutes in that game.
He did.
How did he look?
So again, 10 minutes is hard to judge. He did look very good. He moved well. So on Wednesday, I asked the question about whether we would see him. He said that Central Source told me he'd only trained about 2 sessions with the team. Wasn't sure that he would be able to make the field. So I was a little surprised to see him out there, but you're losing 2-0 in a preseason game. Why not? If he looked good, have him out there. He moved well. He did not look like he was favoring anything. He didn't look like he was apprehensive, but at the same time, he wasn't out there with Forsberg. By the time he came on, it was very much a reserve team. But still, I would say all positives from what I saw from him.
Carlos.
No, I think my biggest question probably would be given some of the changes and whatnot, what do we anticipate, or given what you saw, Anthony, what do you anticipate will be what we see on the pitch in terms of formation, in terms of personnel?
Yeah, so I think it's going to shift through the season because we're kind of venturing into unknown territory this year. We don't know if there's going to be an Open Cup. There's been some rumors about still MLS not wanting to participate in it. We do know that Leagues Cup is going to congest the season, and it is going to be an issue of time management. But At the same time, if this team is fully fit, I think the best way for them to move forward is those three center backs in the back being the best that they can be, letting guys like Duncan not have to worry about their defensive duties and worry about moving forward, and just everyone focusing on the job that they're best at. If they're able to do that, look, they possess the ball well, they move the ball well. The question then comes down to, can the guys up front finish? And in the game I was not at, unfortunately, and the games before at IMG, Van Zier showed signs of doing that, connecting with Forsberg, and Forsberg has said already in interviews, all I got to do is put the ball on a plate, and it's up to them to do what they do. If they do that,
Oh boy.
I mean, this is going to be a very interesting year.
My question has a lot to do with Forsberg now being on the team and doing what he does. Okay, we knew he was going to do this as advertised. Here's my concern. We have two forwards, not named Van Zier, not named Morgan, who are very much right now on my personal milk carton list. Does his appearance puts pressure on them to perform?
Absolutely. Absolutely, 100%. I think that this is the year. So we know what Corey Burke is, right? Corey Burke is one of, I believe, 3 players on this team over the age of 30. He is what he is. The question is going to be, finally, once and for all, we're going to know what Elias Manuel can bring to the table. I think there's been question marks, but there's also been gaps where we go, okay, but what if he had this? Well, now he has that. He has a playmaker. So it's really up to him to prove that he can score against teams other than Charlotte and be able to make it all good.
Right. I mean, maybe we can just simply disguise all the players with Charlotte jerseys and see him go off every.
Just make him wear crown blue.
He'd be fighting for the. I said this jokingly. He'd be fighting for the golden boot. If you see this time, I had a nice little conversation, of course, with the head coach. That is Sandro Schwartz. There was an MLS event, more like a town hall, something like that, where you had everybody interviewing other coaches around the league, and of course, naturally, Sandro Schwartz was there, and I asked him specifically, and others have asked him, how did he feel about the team overall, and does he feel that they were very good to compete? He strikes me as a coach who is very comfortable, in that environment. He knows. Something tells me he knows what he's doing, despite the fact he has no idea what he's running into as the league is concerned. And my question to all of you, not just you, Anthony, but all of you, we are a couple of months away from having, of course, Troy Lesane, who didn't have. He's coming from the USL, and then of course you had Struber, who literally had no experience. Does it matter, yes or no, when you have an experienced coach that knows his way around the league and knows how to win? Does it matter? And this question is also to everybody who's also listening in. Does it matter? Does it move the needle from clown to contender? Your thoughts. Starting with you, Carlos.
That's a good one, Gary. You caught me on that one. I come from the mindset that players play, right? And so I always find that to pit a majority of the blame on a coach, and we've had these conversations week in and week out, right?
Yeah, of course.
And I just don't, I believe that there are certain decisions that a coach makes that do impact the game. But at the end of the day, it's the execution, right? And so, I don't. Again, it's hard, and it's hard for me to say just based on our franchise, right, where we don't have that MLS Cup to be able to say, hey, we did it with this guy, so this works and this doesn't work. So I don't know. To be honest, I really don't know. I'm curious to see what the rest of the gang thinks.
Miguel.
Yeah, I think they picked the coach based on, first of all, I think they picked Troy Lesang last year in the fact that they could mold him as a Red Bull system guy. Okay, I think they have this guy then now because I think he's a Red Bull system guy. Okay, now
there's that word again.
Yeah, I would have wanted them to pick like an experienced an MLS coach that would have like experience even in MLS Cup, and there were a couple, if 2 or 3 that were available. The guy that was coaching Columbus at one point, remember he coached Portland.
Caleb Porter.
Porter, that's the guy.
He went to New England.
Yeah, I know, but that guy would have been my first choice. But I don't think they could mold. I don't think they could mold him into a Red Bull system guy. That's the guy who
would have hated him.
That's it. No. If he would have, if he would have taken
that's the thing, Miguel. That's the thing, Miguel. From just about a lot of people, a lot of fan people, we talk to fan bases, Portland and everything else, Columbus, especially Columbus. I mean, he's a guy that he knows what he's doing, but he's got baggage. He wears out his welcome quickly. But I get what you're saying. They were available. You had him, you had Savarese. Okay.
But then again, yes, Savarese just signed on
with Apple.
With Apple, yeah. I mean, come on. I think Lesane would have been a good choice, except that he's a coach that I think he wants to play actual football. Okay. He doesn't want to play a system. Okay. So would they have given him that option? I really don't think so. I think they want all their teams to play a certain way, and that's it. Okay. And I think they're going to continue from this guy to future coaching signings in the same vein. Thank you very much.
Anthony, we talked about this many times. As you can see, we've had discussions between myself, you, and of course Dan about having an experienced coach making the difference. I got this funny feeling you don't think so.
That the experienced coach makes a difference?
Yeah.
I think it can, as long as they're adaptable. I think that MLS is a very weird beast. And I think that if a coach is coming in with experience and is adaptable to the environments that they've been in, they can't be a coach that's used to, if I need something, somebody opens a checkbook, right? Because there's no team in MLS that can accommodate that with the roster that exists.
Except Miami. Go ahead.
Well, we'll find out about that.
We'll find out about
days.
that.
Well, we'll talk about Miami at another topic. But
we're not gonna go there, Miguel. Not premier show. That's right.
It's really going to come down. This is a coaching league. If you are a good coach, if you are a tactical coach, it will show through. If you are a man manager, it will show through if you can motivate it, especially with this team. I don't know for sure, but I believe this is going to be either the youngest or second or third youngest team in the league. There are only 3 players on this roster that will be 30 or older at the start of the season. So this is a team that needs to be heavily coached. So we'll know in the first third of the season whether he has the chops to do just that, both tactically and man management wise.
Great. Okay. So it really, I guess, the one question I have to ask, for everybody is, we know how, we really want this team to win in the worst way, right? There's no way around it. When you complain about the empty seats, when you complain about the lack of star players, when you complain about how the team is not capturing the attention of the entire metropolitan area, it doesn't matter. You care. Okay. I don't want to hear anybody says, no, Red Bull fans don't care. Yeah, you do. You do care. Okay. Even if you haven't been in an arena in less than 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4, it doesn't matter. You do care. You care enough to want them to win. That said, and I'm asking everybody, doesn't matter whether the team, if the team starts winning, does it matter much that they're not winning in the style that you think they should? And that's a question I have to ask everyone. We're going to start, of course, naturally with the folks who are listening right now, because I'm looking here. They have a lot of opinions on the subject. So I'll ask you, okay, if the team, despite it all, despite the fact that the roster is not rock star or rock solid, and if they start winning, a ton of games, okay, right off the bat, does it matter to you if they don't win the MLS Cup or not? So I'm going to ask everyone out there. Let's hold for a few seconds to see if we can get some of the responses.
Different question, Gary.
Huh?
That's a different question.
It's a different question. Yeah, I'm throwing a curveball. So yeah, doesn't matter. I mean, really, doesn't matter. Doesn't matter if I mean, they want this team. They care enough this team to win. But if they start winning, all forgiven or anything else? Oh, never mind.
Wait.
We'll put the baseball bats away and stuff like that. I'm just curious.
You're saying if they start winning and winning and winning, and maybe they win the Shield, but do not win MLS Cup. That's what you're saying, Gary.
That's exactly what I'm saying.
No.
You're asking the wrong guy, Gary.
You're asking the wrong guy.
You're asking the wrong guy.
Let them sneak into the playoffs on the last day of the season and win MLS Cup.
Miguel's answer is on his screen, Gary. That was an obvious question.
Well, he just said, Vincent had a better one. I just want a team that's competitive, but for me, it's always MLS Cup or bust. So am I.
Thank you.
Okay, I want MLS Cup. Okay, get us that. Okay, get us. If it's not MLS Cup, get us USOC, which we might not even have.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen.
I don't know about that.
We don't know that's going to happen.
Yeah,
we might luck up because we're going to have scab refs. More on that later. But
that's not the direction I thought you were taking that question, Gary. So what I'm going to answer is what I thought you were going to ask, which is,
please, Carlos, please.
If they win, and they get to MLS Cup and they win that somehow, I don't give two hoots how they win games. I don't care if they look pretty, if they're ugly, I'm right
care. There with you.
I want MLS Cup. I don't care how they get there.
I'm right there with you. I'm basically, what did I've always said, that the only expectation I have on this club is this, and that is basically, win the game in front of you. I don't care about. I don't see this team winning MLS Cup. I don't see this team even winning USOC. I do see this team winning a game, more than a couple of games, and maybe that's the way that it should, focus on that. Win games and see where it goes. If they can able to do that and be consistent at it, remember the joke that we had for the last few seasons, guys? Consistently inconsistent. I'm hoping that they can shake that tag. Okay, and be consistent in a positive way. I want to see forwards that can score. And now that you have a playmaker, someone that we didn't have in the last couple of years, ever since Sacha, here you go. You don't have an excuse now. So if you have a player that is Anthony, so with his own two eyes, that you can actually put the ball literally on the plate, here you go. And
it's impressive.
I was they say in hockey, tape to tape. Here you go. Now,
I've seen
what are you going to do?
I've seen Emil Forsberg for years in Leipzig. I've never seen him in person until my trip to California. It is incredibly impressive what he does with the ball at his feet. Like, you're talking top level. I mean, he could have gone to another team in Europe, England, Italy, wherever, and made them that much better.
If you remember, I did ask that kind of. I was like, okay, there's hundreds of teams in Europe that could have grabbed you. Why here? Not to say I didn't want him there. It was like, why New York? Why Harrison? I mean, I love his attitude. One thing that you gotta respect. His attitude is fantastic. He's desperate to win. He wants to grab this team and its fan base by the throat and go, let's go. The last dude that actually dared to do that, you remember, it was a coach that took on a very angry fan base and then came within a sneeze of winning the Eastern Conference Final. we're not going to go into that, but it's just been.
Definitely not.
we're not going to go into that. We're not.
I do want to add one more
We're
thing.
not here to rip open scars. We're not
Yeah.
here to rip open open scars. But
Yeah, I do want to add one more thing though, because I do think this year in particular is a referendum on everything that Red Bull has done since 2019.
a referendum,
which is
you say?
Yes, because what they have done is 2015 to 2018 they did do the young player route, but they did surround them with some veterans. What they did after that was try to put a coach in place that would do the legwork that the veteran players on the field used to do, and it hasn't really worked. They've been able to get results, to make the playoffs, but those young players have made mistakes at key moments, which young players do. You just have to live with that when you have a young team. This year, because I don't want to say that they've added an incredible amount of veteran effort, but Forsberg is that injection of veteranship that is meant to get them over the line. But really, the referendum is on the coaching to get these young players to the point where they could be that kind of team. And if they don't, I believe Red Bull really needs to look at the way they are structuring the team and ask themselves whether the strategy is working. I know the fans have been yelling about it for years. It's not working, blah, 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 blah. And they've been stubborn and steadfast on this route that they've been on. And they've been dedicated to it, right? And you can't knock them for that part of it. They have not, they haven't wish-washed back and forth on it. But if it doesn't work this year, and by not work, I mean, have the kind of year that last year was, which I don't think they're going to have, by the way, that they have to reevaluate exactly how they are building from the ground up.
All right, we're gonna
Anthony,
leave that.
let me ask a quick follow-up to that, because that's an interesting point that you make, because I kind of lean and think toward in that direction as well, right? But at what point, right? Like, at what point do you think that they'll really say, okay, we need to reconfigure this? Like, so in other words, I guess putting the hypothetical situation, right? So last year they make the playoffs, they're still going with the system and this approach that they have. Are we talking about them having to basically, for lack of a better way of putting it, tank before they take that step to say, okay, we really need to rethink how we're doing this? Or if we make it to the playoffs and then we're bounced out, do they say, well, let's give it another crack for another year?
Well, tanking implies they're doing it intentionally. So I'm going to say that, like,
right, that wasn't the best term.
Yes, yeah. They have a horrendous year. 2008, right? Like, or 2009, I should say, not 2008. They have a 2009 year, yes. But to be honest, look, J-Mi hits that penalty, they go to that third game, right? They look at that and with good reason and say, the players are there, the ball didn't bounce our way, or luck didn't go away, and so now we put that one element in place that should be able to get us over that edge. And every single time they've been in that position, it's always been something goes wrong, but not necessarily something that is tangible. It's just been luck, like the bad call with Alex Mule against Atlanta, and all these kinds of things. So I think that what it's going to boil down to is if they bottom out, yeah, they're going to rethink everything. But if they end up fifth or fourth or third and end up getting bounced because of a weird deflection that goes in again, I don't think they're going to give up on it.
All right. We're going to put a pause on that right now. We're going to bring in someone which everybody knows, everyone loves. This guy's been around the sports scene since I was a kid. Heard his voice on radio, 1010 wins during the sports talk, and it's been a fantastic ride ever since. All you guys have known him as with him pre-paired, of course, naturally with Shep Messing in the MSG days. He's a legend. What can I say? He's a local legend. He is Steve Cangialosi, and he is going to make his debut here on the podcast. We'll see you back here in 30 seconds. course, the man over on the lower right or lower left, depending on what you're looking at the screen, of course, is Steve Cangialosi. He's been around with Apple TV since the beginning, but everyone knows he's been with the Metro Stars since the very beginning. He was there for the Metro Stars in Red Bull's biggest moments and, of course, the biggest heartbreaks. Steve, on behalf of everybody here at the discussion group, thank you for your time and welcome aboard, sir. My partners, Carlos, Miguel, he's all yours.
Steve, thanks so much for jumping on. We really appreciate you being a part of the discussion tonight. So I want to kind of start from a little bit broader standpoint before we start to really dig into the Red Bulls and what we have to look forward to this season. But I saw earlier in the past week, the announcement comes out from MLS, everyone that's coming back to the Apple TV team, and obviously you're a part of it. And so last year it was a brand new thing, going to this platform, having someone different call games on a weekly basis. So what I'm curious about is, what did you learn from the first season of this Apple TV situation that you're bringing into season 2 of the platform?
First of all, Gary did a great job showing everyone my age and his age by referencing 10-10 wins. That was a long time ago in my career. So kudos to him for doing his homework to prepare for all this. No, seriously, thank you for having me, guys. It was an interesting ride in the first year of MLS Season Pass on Apple TV on so many levels, both personally, professionally, and I think for everyone involved. I said to a couple of people that this was not the first time I was involved in a startup in my broadcasting career, right? So I had a frame of reference. And the one thing I knew is that going into this, nothing would be more exhausting or rewarding at the same time than this, because it was a lot of hours just getting off the ground for a lot of people behind the scenes who did a great job launching this. Because I think you have to remember, Carlos, this was a venture by MLS that was announced, I think, in July or June of 2022. And then suddenly 8 months later, we're on the air for an entity that had never dealt with anything like this. So to see the manner in which it played out, that was a real great source of pride. Just personally for me, it's a national, well, even that's a misnomer, a global broadcast every time you take the mic. And the dynamic was very different because all of the years that Chet Messing and I did the Metro Stars and the Red Bulls broadcast, our frame of reference was always that team. And the amount of attention that we paid to the two teams was always split 70-30. Red Bulls would be 70 and the opposing team 30. Now you have to kind of get that attention span right down the middle, 50-50. It's challenging, but I think we all did a great job in the first year, and I'm proud of what we did. And now we're trying to build on that in year 2.
Yeah, Mr. Cangialosi, I'm so happy that you're with us to chat. But getting into some Red Bulls talk, other than the signing of Emil Forsberg, is there any other reason for the Red Bulls fan base to be hopeful of an MLS Cup victory this season?
It's a great question. It's a great question, Miguel. And I've struggled with putting that question in perspective for the last month or so. And let me explain what I mean by that, because I think that the narrative for a lot of people who cover the team, and especially the Red Bulls fans out there, went very quickly from the celebratory discussion of Forsberg coming to New York to that inevitable question of what's next? What else are they doing? Okay. And that's fair for a fan base that's never won a championship, for the promises that was made by Red Bull management several months ago, saying we're going to invest a lot more in this team. What I've struggled with is how quickly we started to say what else, because let me stress something that you guys might think is obvious, but a lot of people might not. The signing of Forsberg is a hell of a signing. This is a hell of a player that's coming in. And I will say clearly the most accomplished player since this team signed Thierry Henry. I'll put it at least at the level of Tim Cahill, if not a little bit more than that, because what he could deliver in the offensive third of the field. So that alone is something that I think is a beacon of optimism moving into 2024. I was a little surprised to see how much respect this Red Bull team is getting in places that I don't usually talk about. That betting landscape that's out there, and I've seen them as the 7th or 8th best option to win MLS Cup, which I think to a degree is flattering if this is where the maneuvers stop, and it might not. And all these conversations, I always couch it with the same caveat. Here we are talking, I believe, guys, on the 19th of February, and what the roster is today might not be what it is on April 19th. And I think we can't stress that enough. There are a number of teams that are going to make a lot of acquisitions before this window closes in late April. But to answer your question, they've acquired, I think, one of the 3 best players coming into the league in 2024, and they have a basis on which they can succeed, and that is their defensive prowess, their commitment to pressing. A lot of teams in this league, I still don't think, know their identity. This Red Bull team, if anything else, knows its identity. Now it's a question of how they enact it and whether or not they could score goals. That's the big question.
I think that's such a great lead into, I guess, what my question would be to kind of follow up that, Steve, is so aside from the lack of goal scoring or the potential lack of goal scoring, what else do you see is an area that the Red Bulls need to address, whether it's right before start of the season, which at this point probably not going to happen, but perhaps in the summer window, and then leading potentially into a playoff run?
I think depth all around is a very big issue. I'm satisfied with what they have in goal. Carlos Coronel, I think, has to get back to that level, in all honesty, that he showed in that first season in Major League Soccer, where I felt he was one of the 2 or 3 best goalkeepers in MLS. He was not nominated that year for MLS Goalkeeper of the Year, and he had that chip on his shoulder, Carlos, which I thought was fair. If you look at the Red Bulls starting 11, I think there's a lot to like, but the dynamic now in MLS is that you have to go, I think, 16, 17 deep to be in that conversation of we belong in the chatter of the elite in Major League Soccer. And after you get past that starting 11, there are, I think, some issues because that's where they rely, I think, on the unknown. Players like Serge Goma, who I think has a chance to be a real impact player this year. The challenge for him, of course, has been staying healthy. And we don't know a lot about Goma in the context of, is this guy going to be a 90-minute a game player for that pocket of the season, at least, where you need him to be a 90-minute player. A lot of these things are a project, I think. Take a player like Caleb Wiley in Atlanta. That was a real growth year for him last year. Atlanta got bounced in its first playoff series, but I think that was a year where a guy like Wiley, as the year went on, just all of a sudden elevated his game and showed a more responsible nature in the way he played at left back, where by the end, you kind of said to yourself, okay, going into 2024, this is a 90-minute-a-game player. I would like to talk from a Red Bull perspective this time next year about that same kind of progress with a player like Goma, who in those isolated minutes has shown to be a very dynamic presence for this team. Let's not gloss over the first part that you wanted to skip by, though, Carlos, because I wasn't privy to the first part of your show in this season preview, but the number that stands out to me, and I'm not sure if you guys referenced this or not, expected goals created for the Red Bulls last year. Whether you're into analytics or not, this is not a difficult thing to understand. For the Red Bulls, it was 46.3. They scored 36. That speaks to a great level of inefficiency in front of goal that has to disappear this year if we're going to talk about this team in special terms in 2024.
Yeah, Steve, I got to ask you. In the last few months, there was a bit of a controversy with MLS trying to do away with their participation in the U.S. Open Cup. I thought at the time it was a mistake because that's U.S. Open Cup is, I believe, it's the longest. It's the tournament that has been played for the longest time in North America. I think 1914, and I think MLS should try to keep as much history, soccer history of the United States as much as they can. Now, thankfully, the U.S. Soccer Federation has not allowed them to not participate, although there are talks now that MLS only wants 8 teams to tops 8 teams to participate. How do you view this? Do you think it's detrimental to U.S. soccer?
First of all, I don't know where MLS stands on this. And I'm being honest, Miguel. I've read the same reports that you have read, that a notion has been floated to have only 8 teams participate. This would not be unprecedented in MLS history. There was a time about 12 years ago where we were only sending a fraction of the teams in the league to the U.S. Open Cup. Let me cut to the chase. I'm a U.S. Open Cup fan. I love the tournament. I want to see as many good teams in the tournament participate as possible. And by that, I mean, I would love to see every MLS team participate in this tournament. It's an issue, I think, that still has a chance to be resolved here in a positive manner in the next couple of days. I hope I'm right about that, but I'm not sure. I would love to see this tournament on a bigger platform. And I think that in recent years, when Don Garber has spoke critically of what the tournament is, I think he has spoken about that from the perspective of wanting this to be something that is on a more special platform for everyone to enjoy. The one thing that I would kind of shoot down, Miguel, is this notion that MLS wants to distance itself from the U.S. Open Cup out of fear that lower division teams are going to beat them on the big stage. There have been some nice runs by lower division teams. We all know that. Sacramento Republic had one just a short time ago. You have to go way back to Richmond to find a time when a team actually won this from the lower division since the inception of MLS in 1996. But I think the number exactly is MLS versus lower division teams head-to-head in U.S. Open Cup. MLS has a 78% win rate in those games. So I don't think that the counter argument has much of a leg to stand on. And of course, MLS goes into those games not with full throttle 100% lineups. But I guess I can best leave it at this. I'm a U.S. Open Cup fan. I love the tournament. I would love to see it continue in the best way possible. And I would love to see every MLS team continue in that vein. I'm not sure we're going to see that, though.
Hey, Steve. It's Anthony Merced. I just popped up out of nowhere here.
Anthony.
So, you and I have been in a lot of press conferences, media, and most recently the Jochen Snyder and Sandra Schwartz interview where we always bump into this thing, right, where we're trying to translate Red Bull speak to the fans, and it always ends up, unfortunately, coming out very frustrating for the fans. What do you think this team needs to do to communicate what they do? Because we understand it, but even as a journalist, it's not our responsibility to translate 100% what they're doing. What do you think they need to do to translate to the fans, both their passion for this club, but also just what is their mission?
I think winning solves everything, Anthony. I think it answers a lot of questions, and I think that they're in a good spot in this sense. I think they're poised to have their best season since 2018, for whatever you guys think that's worth. I think they have at least right now, the framework to have the team that formulates the best results since that Jesse Marsh / Chris Armas Supporters Shield winning team in 2018. It's a difficult sell in this market, and I don't like to broad brush, okay? Because I know we're all aware of the success stories that have been told in MLS in recent years and going way back to the late 90s as well. I know there's an envy about what's taken place in cities like Seattle and Portland and Atlanta, and I get that. I would try to kind of focus on local and not big picture. I've always thought that there's something that's been a little bit of a disconnect between what the Red Bulls are and the local community in that section of New Jersey. I would start there because I think there's real growth right there in that area around the arena. When you're talking about connecting with the fan base, I don't think they've held much of a secret about what's in their DNA or what they are all about as a team, whether you agree with it or not. And you're leading me into a broader area of discussion here. All of those years that Chet Messing and I were on the air calling those games because of the commitment to the way they play, the commitment to the high press. It was ugly for so many times, and quite often ugly to the advantage of the Red Bulls in terms of results. But there were so many nights he and I would call games, and then by contrast, we would watch some of the other games in MLS, maybe the national game that week that was on ESPN or Fox when those contracts were still in place in Major League Soccer in broadcasting. And we joke with each other and we say, this is almost like watching a different sport, okay? But you can sell, I think, anything on the basis of winning. Because if you look, I think, at some of those Red Bulls teams that were most successful, never were they ever going to convince anybody that they were playing the prettiest brand of football in MLS. They weren't trying to fool people with that. I think if they come back, and even if this is still their DNA, but they have isolated moments of brilliance from players like Forsberg and Lewis Morgan, if he comes back healthy, and we hope he does, and Dante Van Zier, who stays on the field for the right reasons this year, then I think you've got a lot to sell to this local market. Translation, Anthony, I don't think this is a bad team at all. I really don't. I actually have them top 4, top 5 in the Eastern Conference this year. And don't hold anybody to predictions. That's the one thing I've learned, okay? Because every single season, you're going to have 2 or 3 teams in each conference that punch above their weight and become stories. And then you're going to have 2 or 3 teams who are projected for big things. And really halfway through the season, we start to define them as a chaotic mess. Don't ask me which teams though they are at this point, but it's inevitable. It happens every year. But what the Red Bulls have going for them, they know what they are. There's no question about that. And now I think they've added a really talented player, and maybe there's more on the way.
Yeah, just to double down on what you just said there about winning solves everything. You were there for the New Jersey Devils, Jacques Lemaire time. Not pretty hockey, but they won, and that's all that Devils fans ever really cared about.
Correct. And I think it's a results-oriented business, which is what I think the smartest coaches in the league would agree with. This first year of MLS season pass, for some reason, I did a lot more Philadelphia Union games than Red Bulls games. And, you know, Jim Curtin is coach of a team that has accumulated more points over the past 6 years than any team in MLS in the regular season. But he's a realist. He cuts to the chase. He said, look, this is pro sports. At the end of the year, only one team goes home happy. That's the reality of this. But I think the reality for the Red Bulls, if you take a real serious building block this year, if you take a really serious step forward, I think you potentially create something that's very exciting for the fans as a player like Forsberg turns 33 next year. I don't want to say anybody's a year away, because a year ago I would have told you the Columbus Crew are more than a year away. So all of these teams that know what they are, they're all in play. You just really have to start executing far better in the final third than you did a year ago. That goal differential in terms of expected goals that I referenced a few minutes ago, it was the second worst in MLS last year. It needs to be better. And by the way, guys, because Omir Fernandez is gone now, can you even name the player returning from last season who scored the most goals last year? It's Frankie Amaya. That can't happen again. That can't happen again. That's a good player, Frankie Amaya, but that can't happen again.
Yeah, Steve, I got to ask, there's a looming referee strike.
Yeah.
Uh,
Lockout, Miguel. Lockout. Big difference.
Okay. So what do you think is going to happen? Have you heard anything in regards to the ongoing negotiations?
No, I haven't. I want the best referees on the field on any given day and any given week, and I hope this is resolved sooner rather than later. There's not much I can say about it because I haven't been in the midst of those discussions. As you might imagine, we're all preparing for the opening week of the season, and I can tell you now on Monday night, and this is not much different from the norm, I have not been told who the referees are for the two matches that I'm calling on opening weekend. I'm doing one in Columbus on Saturday. I'm doing another in Cincinnati on Sunday. That's all going to be flushed out. But I think one of the big issues here, Miguel, and something to look for, if we do indeed start this season with replacement referees, it's not going to be the first time MLS has gone down that road. It's happened before, but this will be the first time it happens in the era of VAR. Remember that. There's good and there's bad in that. Number one, VAR can always be, I think, a helpful tool for any referee in the world if it is utilized properly. But you also have a faction of referees who haven't worked yet in a VAR universe. So I think there's going to be a little bit of give and take on both ends. It's obviously going to be a storyline. There's no dancing around that. If indeed this lockout does bleed in to the opening of the season, I really don't want to think about the notion of our best referees in North America not being on the field for any great length of time. And I do know that there's a lot of work being done behind the scenes to try to get this rectified. But here we are. As we're having this conversation, we're less than 48 hours from the start of the season, and this is the reality. I want to see it corrected as soon as possible.
Steve, I have one last one to take us home, a more fun one, if you will. So many years, you and Shep gave us some great calls, some great times on MSG with the Metro Stars, with Red Bull. What is your favorite call, your favorite moment, with the Red Bulls that you had an opportunity to call for us?
Well, I'll give you two. I think that the first supporter shield is the one that's always going to stand out, okay? You have to realize, Carlos, a lot of times for the regional networks, which is what MSG is and what it was for that 2013 season that I'm talking about, when the playoffs begin, it was a situation where the national partners usually took over. ESPN, Fox. It was a rarity that we'd actually get a playoff game. We did a couple, okay? So going back to that first supporter shield, which I consider a major trophy. I know that there are people who want to make this a talking point, but 3 supporter shields in a span of 6 years is a hell of a run for any team in MLS. It's something they can hang their hat on and something that I think few teams will accomplish over the first 50 years of this career. The one moment that I think I won't forget in terms of an action on the field, I think it's Dax McCarty's goal, that game winner against Real Salt Lake years ago in the 4-3 game, because I just think it embodied everything that he was as a team captain, the courage to go into a danger area in the middle of the 18-yard box, surrounded by defenders, all of whom are a lot bigger than him, and not having that diminutive frame of his be anything on the lines of an excuse to make one of the biggest plays anybody made that season or in a lot of other seasons that they had. So that's the one moment, the goal, if you will, that I think will stand out most for me.
Awesome. I think we're about at time here. Here comes Gary, but Gary's muted.
Oh, we had some issues with the lights, but now that's been resolved. Somewhat going to use my backup light. The one question that I have, and this is coming from one of my co-hosts, his name is Lanre Badmus, is this: who do you think, Steve, will be the team's MVP and MIP this season?
That's a loaded question, boy. Look, on the surface, I think a player like Forsberg, and all of this is on the assumption that he stays healthy, okay? There's a lot that we don't know. I'm going to say, if my guess is right, he's going to give you 12 and 12, okay? He's going to give you 12 goals and 12 assists, okay? And that should be good enough to classify him as a team MVP. He's one of those people coming from Leipzig that I think is going to be very comfortable being the ornament on the hood for this team, okay? If you want to make him the center of every marketing campaign, I think there are a lot of guys who would come into this league and not be comfortable with that. I think he's going to relish this. I think he's actually excited about being here in the United States. And everything right now points, I believe, to him having a terrific year and fitting into that MVP conversation. As far as MIP goes, I'm not even sure where to go with that question because, the player that keeps coming back to me, and all of this hinges on some good fortune and him, and I think he's smart enough and a mature enough kid to have absorbed a lot of things, even in the time he wasn't playing. I'm not going to use the phrase MIP, most improved player, but I think the breakout player for this team, Gary, is going to be Serge Goma. If you're talking about a situation where he gives you 2,000 minutes this year, I think he checks the box of what I think you're asking me here. Who's that guy that everybody in the league is going to know by the end of the season that they really haven't thought a lot about just yet?
And we'll leave it right there. Anthony Merced, you can catch him, of course, of Red Bull News Network, along with myself and, of course, Dan Feuerstein. Steve Cangialosi, of course, you can catch him on Apple TV+. He's going to be around with all the season and basically telling the story that is the saga of the Major League Soccer 2024 season. As for the rest of us, the show has basically only began. We're going to be back here next week. And of course, we talk about what happened versus Nashville, and then continue on as our first home game, which will take place against FC Dallas on March the 9th. Steve, Anthony, you have our profound thanks for kicking off for the season. Lift off, gentlemen. So, as we always say, if you happen to miss this particular show, don't even worry about it. You can catch us, of course, on our YouTube channel, and of course, you can catch us on Spotify.com when that episode is loaded the very next day, and also GoalsTV.com, another outlet where you can actually catch this show. So every week you can get your fix on if you can't catch us live. And for those of you who are listening tonight and giving us your questions and your comments, we thank you so much. After all, this is your show, and this is the reason why we do this. So, one down, multiple episodes to go. For Steve Cangialosi, Anthony Merced, Miguel Nunez, and Carlos Cano, and myself, Gary Redmond, thank you all so much for joining us. We will see you next week. Until then, goodbye for now. And as